See, she's a black woman, okay? First and foremost, she's a black woman in America. So there's that.
It sounded like a war zone in downtown LA.
They are saying they're doing this because they're going after criminals. They're not going after criminals, they're going after workers.
Mayor Bass, thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
Let's just talk about what's happened over the last few days. ICE showed up. Was it Friday? Were the first
It was
ICE
Friday,
raids?
that's right.
Can you tell us where they showed up?
Sure, they showed up in multiple workplaces throughout the city. 3 to 7 work sites were raided.
It sounded like a war zone in downtown LA, with federal agents hurling flashbangs into the air, trying to scatter protesters during an ICE raid.
They are saying they're doing this because they're going after criminals. They're not going after criminals, they're going after workers.
But you know, when the president came in, he talked about violent criminals. He talked about drug dealers. How you go from a drug den, which is where it was supposed to be focused, to Home Depot, and people running through the parking lot. In Los Angeles, day laborers, the people that hang out at Home Depot looking for work day by day, we have centers like a structure. And so it's a day laborer center. And so to raid a Home Depot, you have people fleeing out of that, fleeing around the parking lot, and maybe even into traffic. It creates a sense of fear and chaos in the city that feels very deliberate.
Well, let's talk about the three locations. A Home Depot inside of the city of Los Angeles, and 2 other locations. What were the 2 other locations?
They were warehouses, basically.
Was there a heads up given to you as the mayor that they were coming?
Not. Absolutely
So there
not.
was no warning or anything letting the city know of these raids that were gonna take place. Totally no respect. But see, she's a black woman, okay? First and foremost, she's a black woman in America. So there's that.
A very sophisticated, well-established immigrant rights movement here that essentially has been promoting a rapid response network. And that means any sightings of ICE in the community will dial into this network. And through social media, you will have people come out and protest. The Los Angeles Police Department was not notified. No one in the city was notified, and the school district.
The day before those ICE raids, were there protests and was there any sort of incidents as what we've seen in the city of Los Angeles?
No. If you want to look at what has happened in our city, it traces back to Friday. If you go back to our city on Thursday, the city was peaceful. There were no protests. Nothing was happening here. And so you look at the raids that happened the next day in a city like this, that's why it feels like maybe we're part of a test case of what happens if and when the federal government wants to take over a city. So for the president to federalize the National Guard, to take the power away from the governor and say, these are now my troops, and I am going to deploy them around the city when no help was asked for.
Let me break it down just a little bit so that people understand it. What you're saying is nothing's happening on Thursday.
No.
The Trump administration sends ICE into Los Angeles. They raid these 3 locations. That triggers protests. Then you have the Trump administration then say, aha, there's a crisis.
Exactly.
We need to solve it with the National Guard.
Absolutely. And when no one asked for help.
Right.
The night before, when I was trying to prevent this from happening, there was a protest that happened at night. There were a few people that were involved in vandalism and should have appropriately been arrested, but it was 100 people. This is a city of 3.8 million. Why was the National Guard needed when Los Angeles Police Department could take care of it? And if they needed any help, there's adjacent police departments.
He made it seem like the entire city was on fire. Unbelievable. This is really some Twilight Zone shit.
We go back to you said there were 100 people that were protesting. Among those protesting was David Huerta. Who
No.
Was he one of the protesters?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, David Huerta was in custody at the time of that protest.
Talk about his arrest.
Yes,
How did his arrest
yes.
come about?
So what happened is in one of the 3 locations on Friday, He was at that location, just as I described, as part of the Rapid Response Network, to witness what was going on.
Okay.
A scuffle happened with with ICE. He was arrested, and when he was thrown to the ground, he hit his head, and so he was hospitalized briefly for that. I went to the hospital, I visited him there, and right after my visit, he was being taken into federal custody. We're waiting to see, his arraignment will take place today, but I just have to say that he is one of the most respected, established labor leaders in our city. He's the president of an SEIU local, USWW. They have a lot of workers who are janitors, a lot of workers who are at the airport. And so once again, it was just an unnecessary situation.
It feels like his arrest was an escalation.
It was, right.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And at the time that Donald Trump, that the current president, praised the National Guard for, quote unquote, bringing order to the city of Los Angeles, were the National Guard even here?
No, they weren't. He actually was praising the local police.
Right.
That the National Guard was not here then. Now, the next morning, the National Guard was here.
And where are they deployed?
They are deployed in 2 places in the city of Los Angeles, 2 federal buildings. One federal building in Westwood, where there has been absolutely positively no protests related to this. There's always some protests out in front, unrelated. Then the federal building downtown that had been the scene, a focal point of a lot of the protests.
And we've seen the tagging. We've got the federal building. We can see there's lots of tagging on the walls, lots of negative messages toward Trump, lots of negative messages toward ICE. All of that is a result of what's happened from Friday on.
Yes, and I just have to tell you that, you know, people who do that, don't tell me you support immigrant rights, okay? Because there's nothing connected to that level of vandalism that is going to further the cause, the movement to support immigrants in the city. Those are 2 disconnected issues.
It seems that the Trump administration created the incident and then is attempting to solve the incident with the federalized National Guard. The National Guard has not been deployed to a state without the state asking for it since 1965. And at that time, it was to Selma, it was to Alabama, because marchers, peaceful protesters, were being brutalized by local sheriffs. It's a bit ironic that now this essential takeover of the California National Guard is in order. What do you think that their purpose seems to be?
Well, I mean, I actually think they're testing out what happens when the federal government seizes power. I mean, I don't know any other way of looking at it, because you can't say that we deployed the National Guard because the city was in chaos and mayhem was happening. Mayhem happening with 100 people in a city of almost 4 million? I don't think so. So that's why it makes us feel as though we're a laboratory for what might, a laboratory, or we're sending a message to other cities, this could happen to you. And I just feel that it is so unfortunate. You have to dial back to this city on Thursday. Nothing was going on here. If the raids had not happened on Friday, nothing would be going on today.
I can tell you that we've been driving around the city since Thursday. We arrived actually on Thursday. We came down, it's BET weekend, it's Pride Month, there are lots of events going on. What we mainly saw was brunch. We saw people living their normal lives. It seems that these incidents are concentrated in a very, very small part of the city. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is accurate, and thank you for asking that, because you are talking about several streets in downtown. Our city is vast. The population is 3.8 million, but if you drive around, it's about 500 miles all around.
Do you know how many people have been, I think in a lot of people's view, kidnapped, taken into custody by ICE? Do you know who they are and where they are?
So let me just say that I thought it was around 50. I learned this morning, I had a meeting with the immigrant rights groups, and it's over 100, or it might be from 100 to 300 people.
And do you know the nationalities of those people and their immigration status?
No, and not only that, you asked where are they? We don't know where they are. I mean, and this is a big departure from the past. The people who are in custody are not allowed to have legal counsel. Their families don't necessarily know where they are. You know, you have kids running around looking for their parents. I mean, this is just egregious. I think it's really important to stop for a minute and talk about the emotional impact that this has on families. There are people who woke up today saying, well, I don't know that I'm gonna go to work because there's people in my workforce, or maybe me, who doesn't have documents. Is this today that I never see my family again? You know, or kids going to school. Well, if I go to school, then maybe my parents won't be here when I get back. That type of fear was spread in the last Trump administration. And I'm worried that all of that comes back, right when things like this happen and people start questioning whether they should leave their house.
There is reporting that Stephen Miller has demanded 3,000 ICE arrests a day. Yes. And then he's putting tremendous pressure on ICE to snatch people and saying that should not depend on whether someone has a criminal record. Meaning, go to the Home Depots, go to the 7-Elevens.
Let me make it worse. Today I learned that people who are showing up for their immigration appointments, their annual check-ins, they're here, they're not citizens, but they are legal in the sense that they have green cards, they're going through the process, that even they are being detained. So you show up for your appointment at the immigration office and you get detained. And that they have been detaining in addition to the individual that shows up, but their family members if they're there with them. So you're telling people to become illegal. You're telling people that. Because why would I go for my legal appointment if you might arrest me? Yeah. So I'm not going to show up and then I'm out of compliance.
It feels like Los Angeles and Los Angeles County are an ample feeding ground to do what this administration wants to do. This city is it 50% Latino? 50%. Heavily Asian American. What is the Asian American percentage? Over 20%, about less than 10% African American. Right. But if they want to hunt for brown people, this seems like a great place to do it. Talk about the level of fear that you're hearing from your constituents in this city. As you said, to go to school, to go to work, to go to Home Depot.
Well, I think the telling the stories of people, the 9-year-old who is going to be deported, children especially, who are U.S. citizens, but because their parents are being deported, the whole family gets deported. People sometimes going to countries that they have no connection to, and in the fear that is. So just think about this. The husband maybe goes to the factory. The wife is doing childcare in someone's home. Now you have two situations disrupted. The family who needs the childcare might not have somebody taking care of their children, and the husband who's working in a factory, now he's gone. And so you could lose two incomes at the same time. Or the reverse, the wife who is working in a factory and the husband who might be doing landscaping in a home. It is a disruption of our economy. This is a city that is based on immigrant labor. And if you scare off the workforce, how are we going to get major things done?
To go back to the police for a moment, because there's an argument to be made that if this is a sanctuary city, meaning that police are not supposed to cooperate with ICE and help to detain people based on immigration status, should the LAPD be intervening to help people who are being dragged off by ICE officers?
The question is, what does that intervention look like? Because if the suggestion is that LAPD is supposed to get into a contentious conflict with the federal ICE folks, I don't know how that actually plays out. Yeah. Like they're trying to take someone away. Should the LAPD jump in and try to prevent that person from being taken away? I think that our notion of what was meant by sanctuary city is getting tested like it has never been tested before, because we never questioned whether leaders would follow the rule of law.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that LA is you said it's being set up as a test case. Do you believe the Trump administration is setting up a situation where the LAPD will potentially go too far in trying to regain order in these situations?
I don't think so in terms of the LAPD piece. But I do think so because I feel like it's an experiment here. It would have been one thing if the city was overrun with undocumented gang members or, none of that's happening.
You're saying that gang members are not coalescing at Home Depot? And
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Where do you expect or do you have any idea where these raids are going to go next in your city?
Absolutely no idea. I think Home Depot.
There's no conversation.
No, not only that. We don't know how long this is going to last. We've been told all sorts of different things. This is going to go on.
Of course, there's no communication. They're not going to give any warnings or let her know anything or email or tweet it or anything like that. The fuck?
It's going to go on for 60 days. What does that mean? Are there going to be raids every day? Are there going to be multiple raids every day? What does all of that mean? No, there's no communication.
How do you protect schools, hospitals, places of worship in a situation like that as well?
Well, we are fortunate here that we have a very strong superintendent who is also an immigrant. And he is very strong in protecting his students. As a matter of fact, he had a press conference which a number of the union leaders and parents took place in today. And he said that, classes will remain open through the summer, because one of the things that we learned in the pandemic is that in this city, families were, the schools were playing an important nutrition role for the entire families, where the families were relying on the schools for food. And so we can't have people who now won't go to school. How is the family going to be fed? I mean, this is the richest country in the history of the world. Why would we do things like this?
The governor apparently is filing a lawsuit because his authority was undermined by the Trump administration. Is there a world in which this city of Los Angeles and Los Angeles County also files suit?
Oh, yes, it is. It is. Now, in Los Angeles, we have an independent elected city attorney, and I know that she is looking at what the ramifications are for the city and whether or not there should be suits.
And so just for those who support the idea of mass deportation and say to themselves, well, there wouldn't be this kind of response if there weren't gang members at those Home Depots, if there weren't gang members running throughout the city. What do you say to them?
But they're not. I mean, that's the thing, is that if you go to a Home Depot and talk to a day laborer, these are people that are just looking for work, legitimate, legal work. On a day-by-day basis, can you imagine just the instability they have to deal with under normal circumstances? Now, is it even an option for them to go to the Home Depot to see if they can get work on a day-to-day basis? So you're talking about destabilizing the local economy that is completely dependent on immigrant labor. And you can look at different industries, the construction industry, the hospitality industry, childcare, housekeeping, all of the variety of things and sectors of the workforce that are dominated by immigrant labor.
How much is this impacting the ability to rebuild after the catastrophic fires? The Eaton fire heavily damaged Altadena, the fires in Pasadena and all of these places. In your constituency, though, you're inside of LA. I know there were also damages there as well.
Right.
How much is this impacting the ability to rebuild if the laborers are afraid to go to work?
Well, and let me say, yes, the only jurisdiction I have is the community of Pacific Palisades. We don't know yet. The raids just started on Friday. I will tell you that on Thursday, there was no impact.
Right.
On Friday, I have to worry that there will be impact, and the impact could just be fear. I mean, sometimes it's not that the raid needs to take place. Right. Just knowing that ICE is in the city creates a sense of insecurity and fear within the community. And I will tell you one thing, I would hate to see if the workforce decided they weren't going to work in the Palisades, because if you look at the Latino workforce in terms of construction, you are talking about the overwhelming majority.
And finally, do you believe that this city was targeted because it is a heavily minority city and because it is a Democrat-run, black woman-run city? Do you think that had an impact on the choice of the city?
I just can't tell you why we would have been. I mean, what was the point? Again, there was not a problem.
Right. Yeah.
So when there isn't a problem, when it's a problem looking for, a solution looking for a problem, then you have to wonder. And a way I have felt overall is, let's test the nation's second largest city.
And do you think they're testing it in order to try to have an Insurrection Act moment so that he can declare martial law? That is sort of the conspiracy theory, what people fear.
Right.
Maybe not a conspiracy theory because he seems to be doing it.
Right. I certainly hope not. That's the only thing that I could say. Because in a year, we're going to have the World Cup in this city.
Yeah, how does that impact the World Cup and the Olympics?
Well, 8 games will be played here. The World Cup is going to last for 40 days. So that's 40 days of watch parties and festivals all over the city. And we can't have a city where people don't want to come to. I'm a soccer player from, Bolivia. Do I come to the United States? Will I get detained? So that uncertainty then spreads around the world. Maybe I won't go play in the United States because the United States is not safe. That's a horrible thing to think that people...
She's a black woman, okay? First and foremost, she's a black woman in America. So there's that.